Hey guys, welcome to this appendix for the blueprints. I realize I did not go over the composition methods really well last time, and I did fail to mention a few things that you might need and are sort of kind of important. So we're going to start with the composition method. Last time I kind of got confused myself because frankly it's been a fairly long video. I was starting to mix up a bunch of stuff when it comes to the material I was covering, and also because I basically forgot how to properly composition. That's what it is. So it took me a couple of minutes to figure it out, but it was too late yesterday, so I kind of wanted to do this today. Now, as you can see, I've renamed the ray gun here, the actor EX, into a ray gun. And I'm going to create a couple of new actors. First of all, I'm going to create an actor here, and I'm going to create another actor here. Reasons unknown just yet. So as you can see, I have my two new blueprints. I'm going to rename this into a grenade. Now the grenade will be its own object, just like the ray gun is. As you can see, the ray gun is its own object, and it possesses the obliterate command, or function in this case. Here, I will open my grenade, and I will simply add another static mesh. In my static mesh, I will make this to be a sphere. Ah, crap, sphere. Regular sphere, no, not shape, not material sphere. So there's my sphere. I'm gonna just squish it a little bit to make it look like a grenade. Does that even look like a grenade? I'm pretty sure it does not, but it'll have to do. Now in the event here, I'm simply gonna have a custom event. I'm gonna call this explode. All right, there's some kind of functionality available to me. So that's my grenade done, right? Nothing fancy yet. Now, for a second here, just I want you to think about this. I'm going to create I've created another actor because I want to compile these two together. I have a weapon, a primary weapon, and I have a grenade, which is a utility, for example. I'm going to use this to create a loadout. Now, my loadout is another independent actor. For example, this could be a backpack. So let's create another static mesh. Add another static mesh, static mesh, static mesh. There we go. Add another static mesh. I'm going to say this is my backpack, and it will be basically a box, cube. It's a shape of a cube. If this looks like a backpack to you, then, you know, excellent. If it doesn't, I probably shouldn't have scaled it in such a way. Okay, this is really bad. Let's just make this like that. There's my backpack. All right. So my character will be wearing this backpack like so, right? So this is the backpack, and it needs to obviously hold the whatever. So let's just say I want to have a custom event, which is assign or just assign. Okay, this is the assignment event, assign loadout for whatever reason. It doesn't matter what event I have here. I might have no events at all. Now to this backpack, you'll be thinking, right, I need to add my grenade, but it's not here, of course, because as we learned last time, we need to have an actor child. I kind of thought it was a given since, you know, you'll be adding, like whatever you add to it is going to be a child anyway. But whatever. It's going to be my nade and another one. And this one is going to be my primary. Now in this case, I want them both to be the children of the backpack, not the children of themselves. And as you can see, this is the nade of a grenade like this. And this is the primary in terms of a ray gun. All right. Now this is obviously not pleasant. It doesn't really look like a loadout, but imagine for a second that this is my setup, right? I got my nade, and I'm simply going to scale this a little. Oops. Just my nade, only my nade, not everything. Scale this guy up or down or whatever, just all of them. Can I scale this properly? Excellent. Kind of went the wrong way, but whatever. So this is my nade. It's going to be dangling from the side, and this is my. It just looks like something else, but whatever. That's my loadout. Now in my backpack, I'm going to compile. In my backpack, of course, I can double click and simply select this to move it around, but I'm not going to be able to access the, the things. I can use their events, but nothing more. So the idea here is, if I go to the event graph, what do you think is going to happen? Since I have my primary and my grenade, which are both classes, right? We've got a primary ray gun and a primary grenade, and one of them has an obliterate, the other one has an explode function. If I go ahead and right click and say explode, I'm going to get nothing. If I right click and say obliterate, I'm going to get nothing. Why is that? Because the idea is that these are self-contained objects. They do not need to share information. They shouldn't be readily available in terms of their functionality to the thing that it's being compiled to. The idea is that the backpack is simply a holder for the primary and the nade. So whatever, I could throw the grenade, but this could also be something else. This doesn't have to be a grenade, right? This is simply a child actor. Depending on the loadout, I could have a smoke grenade. I could have a flashbang. I could have anything. This could be anything. That's why this is obviously a child actor. But the point is that my loadout is going to be part, for example, of my character. There's my character, and I'm going to say I'm going to grab my actor, child actor, and this will be loadout. Okay, and this is only one. There's only one loadout, but I could use loadout A, B, C, D, E, F. Right? There's a bunch of loadouts that could replace this particular variable, which is simply holding the child actor class. As you can see, if I compile this right now, I will have the loadout over here, and I will have the class defaults of this particular actor. Reason being, if I go into my, right now, for example, if I create a variable and I make this, I don't know, this is my loadout ID, for example, and this is a integer, and it is interface editable, it will become part of my class defaults over here. As you can see, default. Obviously, I can assign it to a group, but I'm just going to leave it to default. My loadout is going to be ID 3. Maybe this is the third loadout of the bunch. I'm going to compile this, and if I go back to my character, I should be having access to simply, if I recompile, there's my default, and I can change my actor ID. Do I have access to it? Here's another question. Let's right click, say loadout, get loadout ID. I do not have it. Because again, these are things inside the object itself. I could grab the object, right? But even so, I still won't get my loadout. Okay, loadout ID is gone. It's not there because I need to cast this. Okay, I need to just cast this like that. Cast to loadout because it has to be the loadout itself. And then once I have it as the loadout on its own, I will say that this, I need to get my loadout ID, and that's how you would get it. So this is not much different than simply working with an entirely different object somewhere outside the scene. The difference being that outside the scene you need to have some kind of trigger to get the object, right? Get all actors of class, get something with the interface, get this, get that. In this case, you already have it in your getter. It's already sort of gotten, right? Because you do have a reference to it, but you don't have access to it. This is only a reference to the object itself. That being said, you now realize that I cannot simply, draw these functions out of the nade or of the ray gun on its own. That's how you composite stuff. So composition works. Now, if I go ahead and inherit from this guy, and I open my inherited character, you will see that he inherits everything that my parent has. Now, here's the interesting thing. I kind of failed to mention this last time. By the way, this would also be true if I did something in my grenade. I'll show you this in a second. But here I failed to mention that you could show inherited variables to get actually the things that you were inheriting. Kind of forgot that, all right? So I'm sorry about that. Some of the variables are available here when they're inherited. But the point is, if I go into my, let's say, I don't know, a grenade, and I create a new variable, well, it's not like that. I create a new variable and I say that this is my area of, or just radius, explosion radius. It's good to always name your stuff appropriately. So let's just say it's a float, because why not? Now I have my explosion radius on my nade. Do you think I'll be able to use it in my loadout? I should be able to use it in my loadout because in the class defaults of my nade, I should now have explosion radius right now. What do you think is going to happen if I go to my character EX? I'm going to click to my class defaults. Well, class defaults is not really going to have much, but where it is, actually not here, sorry. In the loadout, do I have my grenade explosion radius? Do I have it? I don't see it. That's because you don't. All right? You simply don't. At least that's what I found out. There's no way to get, you only get one way down. You don't get all of the way further. You don't drill into the character. Yeah, you could grab the loadout and drill into the, for example, you can get component, right? You could grab your loadout and say, I want to get component. Oops, I got the mesh. You grab the loadout and you say, I want to get component. And in this case, I want to get child actor in this case or something, but this is replicated. So but you can play around with these, but in general it's not needed. You shouldn't need to do this. Whatever you create, for example, this loadout should be its own thing, right? It should be its own thing. It should have its own logic. You shouldn't have to modify this inside your blueprint, even though it's possible. That defeats the purpose and the idea of composing an actual blueprint or an object or an actor or whatever it is you're composing. In this case, I have a loadout that has independent grenades and independent weapons. So whatever weapons I decide to use, they will be part of the loadout, and the character doesn't need to know how the weapon operates, right? He needs to know that if you press the trigger, the weapon will fire, for example. Something like that. Okay? Of course, it is sometimes necessary to talk between these, and you do this in a direct fashion by casting stuff around and getting components, etc., etc. So that's just fine. In this case, it's completely appropriate. But in general, you want to be making this a little bit more streamlined. Next, you've got the library. I kind of wanted to mention something because it's something I often do if I need to have similar situations when it comes, for example, to the eye damageable, or let's say eye healable. Let's say my eye healable has the heal function, and I really want to, define the heal function to be pretty much the same across all of my objects that implement this. Generally speaking, you might want to get away. You could get away with something like inheritance in that case, since by creating a base class, you simply add the heal there, and then you just anything that inherits from it is healable, such as orcs and elves and whatever it is you make, aliens, right? So this would be one way. Another way, of course, would be to be implementing interfaces and working with them. But if you want to, for some reason, really fast create definitions for your interface implementations by simply having the appropriate function. So we could have, in this case, remember we have the heal. So here would be a prime example of how to perform that. You could create the function. You could even define all the local variables or the logic required. And since it has an input and output, you could even say something. You can even cast stuff in here, right? You could cast to eye healable. Just say cast eye healable. As you can see, I can grab my eye healable object. Now here's an interesting bit that I also failed to mention. Obviously, this is what I wanted to say. You can do whatever you want in here, and then you simply go into something that implements your interface without the logic, and you simply plug this logic in, or override or replace it or whatever. But this kind of defeats the purpose of really having a interface, because it allows you to have different functionality across multiple objects that share the same type, right? So put it that way. Now another thing here is that you can cast to eye healable, but as a class. Now what's the difference between those? Now you see, a class is the fundamental thing that defines the object, right? So in this case, we already have something that is created. Here, we just have the logic, the functionality. This might make little sense, but the difference is that here you can simply select the class on its own, but it allows you to work on the basic structure of whatever it is you're using. To put it simply in layman's terms, this is for stuff that is created and exists. So if I were to cast to game mode, right, I could cast to game mode base and game mode class. They both exist. Like the game mode exists the moment the game starts. So this is really pointless unless you really want to do something fancy. You can, in this case, you can fundamentally change the object itself, right? This is a type, I believe. yeah, it's a type, and this is a reference to the class. This is a reference to the type. It's kind of like passing by reference and by value. But the difference is that here I can play with the logic inside the blueprint, like the basic blueprint, or in C++ or whatever it's written in. And I can do that over here in much the same fashion I can do in game mode. Basically, if you have something that is simply a functionality and does not get spawned inside the world, you want to get the class, but because if you try to get the type and it's not in the world, you're not really going to get it because it doesn't exist. Okay? So just put it this way. If it exists, it's a cast to this. If it doesn't exist, it's a cast to this. Now, there's a little bit more nuance, and I recommend you just read up on your own. But generally speaking, you'll be using the cast to types because you'll be working mostly with objects that exist in the world. This is mostly for back-end stuff or something that is just a help, a bunch of helper functions or something. Allows you to really work your way properly. Now, I do believe it's even possible to grab my library. I believe cast to library. Is it possible to cast my library? No, because it's not a class, of course, but it was just worth a shot. I was curious if I had access to it through it. Well, I'm currently in my library, so let's try to do this in my character. Cast to library. Nope, no way. Yeah. So this isn't really a class, it's just an existing library. That's why, by the way, it's available everywhere because it's not a class, it's not an object, it's simply a library. But it was just worth a shot. Now, that being said, this is how you would utilize your library to have common functionality, which is just to save your time. And this is how you would cast stuff around. Also, whenever you inherit something, I don't know if I've already mentioned that, but you can get your inherited variables here. I believe I did, so I'm kind of repeating myself. I'm sorry, guys. And that's pretty much it. That's kind of all that I failed to mention in the last video. So that's not a lot. I realize that's not a lot. I simply wanted to go over the composition mode itself. So as you see, it's a pretty deep system. I encourage you again to play around with it. I encourage you to try many different ways. You know what? The best solution you could do is to put a goal in front of yourself to print a string saying, let's just create a health system or a damage system, and you don't even need like any effects. Just print a string and try to achieve the same effect in 3 different ways, 4 different ways, 5 different ways. Try to achieve the same effect as many different ways as possible. This will allow you to really see the scope of how to operate and navigate yourself in the Unreal Engine 4. Because again, like I said, it also depends where you put your logic. You don't want to be putting your controls, for example, in a character EX mode, in a character actor / blueprint, because once it gets destroyed, let's say the character in this case explodes and just it gets deleted, the player will no longer have an option of controlling anything, okay? Because the player is represented by the player controller. So you want to manage your controls in the player controller's blueprint, right? That does not get destroyed. Same thing goes for pawn. Maybe there's some specific controls for the tank, right? Such as maybe secondary shots, maybe using the assault machine gun or whatever, right? If you're driving a tank, you want to put this in the pawn EX or create a separate player controller, allowing you to have a more general control setup, and then every time you go into a tank, you simply swap your player controller in the world defaults, or you simply utilize a different player controller the moment you enter the tank. Same goes for pretty much everything else. For example, you would want to get the most important logic in the game mode. If you're making a multiplayer game, you want to be syncing your game state to the game mode to distribute information between the two. Currently, of course, as you can see, it's always replicated. So replicate movement as well. You can replicate that. It's kind of ineffective, but it's important so that to prevent speed hacks. But that really is outside the scope of our videos. I simply created it to kind of replace all of these here. And of course, lastly, you want to have your like for example your UI, you wouldn't want to put it in, let's say, the character or the pawn, right? Your UI generally should remain either in the game mode or in the player controller or in the HUD. Usually people put in the player controller. I like to put in the HUD because it just makes more sense. Again, like I said, this is kind of a deprecated class of a blueprint. It's an old system, legacy system, but the container and the event graph is still there, and it persists throughout the level, so it makes a lot of sense to use it. It doesn't get replicated or anything, so you can't really go wrong with putting your stuff in the HUD. Of course, it's also possible to use the level blueprint, which I really didn't talk about because I rarely use it. Now, the idea of the level blueprint, I'm just going to go over it really quick, is that it is available worldwide, so it's only for the world, but it does not work outside the world, and there's some things you can't do. It does have its limitations, such as like if you want to reference something, you need to have it selected here in the viewport, and then you get the reference to it, or something like that. And it's sometimes difficult to talk between the level blueprint to the, let's say, game mode or something like that. In general, level blueprints are for quick prototyping or maybe something that you do. But if you want scalability, level blueprint is something you don't want to have logic in, because it's only tied to the level itself. Unless it's something very level specific, like a flood, right? Maybe there's this flood and there's this huge rain and water starts rising up or whatever. But then, even then, I would probably still put in the game mode, because what if I decide to use this again, right? What if I decide to flood another part of my game? And what am I gonna have to copy this stuff over again? And the worst thing is, of course, you can't really copy that effectively from your level blueprint. You can't translate into another blueprint, such as, for example, a game mode, very effectively, because the way references work inside level blueprints. So just play around with the level itself. Maybe use it, maybe don't. It's up to you. And of course, you can see you can load loads of different classes here. But I would recommend you kind of avoid it. Okay, I simply, like, I really don't see a level blueprint being a very useful feature, at least for me. As you can see here, is a specialized type of event that acts as a level-wide global event graph. So maybe you could use it to spawn stuff, right? Spawning is good because you get direct references to spawn points, and the game mode doesn't really care where they spawn as long as they spawn. Maybe you could use the level blueprint for something like that, because supposedly every level will have its own different spawn point, such as in this case, well, there's one here. That's my actor. Oh no, that is my spawn point. So yeah, there's one here, and then you can put one here, and maybe put one here, and one here, and this one went kind of far. So you got all of these different spawn points, and perhaps you need to create an array of them or whatever, right? Again, I try to avoid the level blueprint. All right, guys, that is it. Now we're done with blueprints. That's it. I'm not sure if I will create a step-by-step video for the game itself. We'll see. Probably not. I'll probably have it like in a speed creation mode, because I think I explained everything I could possibly explain and that possibly needed explaining for a startup development project. And since presumably your game will be different from mine, it kind of doesn't make much sense if you were to follow along. So you'll probably have like some kind of a sped up video where I just compile and make the game at least to a point, and then we might talk about the UI, because I didn't talk about UMG and how the UI works. But until we get to that point, whether I make a video or not, it doesn't matter. At this point, you are completely equipped of making your own logic inside here. Yeah, you're not ready to ship a game because you don't know how the UI works, but you can definitely start working on your logic, right? I might go over the prototype, because I do want to prototype this to illustrate the other workflow, because currently we do have the assets. We really have everything we need. Have assets, animation, probably don't have sound, but we'll sort out the sound later. So as you can see, a lot of possibilities. Explore them, utilize them, work with them, learn them. All right? Make sure to have at least a basic understanding of the library. That's it, guys. Bye-bye.